I also want to make sure you understand something. I am giving you practical tools. And the reason I know that is because last week I got a weird text on Wednesday night. You remember I made a point last week of telling you that a deal that April and I had was when one of us was talking and the other person picked up their phone, the other person would just kind of stop talking. I got a text like 2 hours after this thing ended from somebody saying, that was the best advice I've ever gotten. When I wanted to stop talking, I just pick up my phone. It's so quiet around here. I promised I would not divulge who that text came from because Kelly would get mad at Jordan if I said it out loud. So I will not say who sent me that text message. But Hawks, it's good to see you tonight. One last point before we get into tonight. You can find the audio for each week on the Eastridge website. I sent it out on Facebook earlier today. If you miss a week, that's okay. You'll notice if you listen to it, there's a lot of stuff that'll be missing because the experiential stuff I can't really recreate on audio, but I wanted you to know that it was there. All right, let's start with a word of prayer and we'll get into it tonight. Father, I come to you now, and I thank you for the passion of the people in this room. I thank you for putting on their hearts the idea that they want to enhance their marriage, the idea that they want to reconnect with the person they care about most on this planet. God, I pray that tonight you'll give them the ability to do that. I pray that you'll give them a chance to disconnect from the world and reconnect with each other. I pray that you'll give them the chance to focus on you and focus on their spouse. And I ask these things through your Son. Amen. Let's go ahead and jump right into what we're doing tonight. The theme for tonight is enhancing the good vibes. In short, our goal tonight is to ensure that you like your spouse. Hey, Jeff, can we turn it up just a little bit? Is to ensure that you like your spouse more so when you go home than you did when you walked in. Now, you may really like your spouse already. That's all right. We're going to enhance that. And if you don't like your spouse, then just sit quietly and don't say a word. If you will look in Philippians, we're going to start tonight in the first chapter of Philippians. There's a much more detailed explanation of this on the introduction page, but I'm going to mention a couple things quickly so you know where we're going. We're going to focus on something that Paul did a lot of. If you look through Paul's readings, or through his writings, you'll see that before he gets to the business, as he does in Philippians, he's got a lot of stuff he needs to cover. He's got a lot of things he needs to be sure that they've addressed. He wants to address some discord and division within the church. He addresses some negative teaching and consequences of false teachers. He's got serious business to attend to. But what I want to focus on tonight is what he does before that. Because this is pretty common with Paul. What he does before he gets to the business starts in chapter 1, verse 3. If you want to read with me, that's where I'm going to be. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. It is right for me to feel this way about all of you, since I have you in my heart, and whether I am in chains or defending and confirming the gospel, all of you share in God's grace with me. God can testify how I long for you. I long for all of you with the affection of Christ Jesus. I long for all of you with the affection of Christ Jesus. Paul goes out of his way, before he gets into the business with people, Paul goes out of his way to talk about how much he appreciates them. He goes out of his way to talk about what they mean to him, what they've done for him, how they've supported him. Paul is an amazing example of expressing fondness and expressing admiration. Here's the reality. The more you tell your wife that you love her, the more you tell your wife how much you care about her, the more you tell her the things you appreciate about her, two things happen. One, she becomes more secure in the idea that these things you're saying are true. And two, you feel more secure that what you're saying is true. It's weird how that works. The things you say out loud have a tendency to stick in your mind. I'm going to give you two scriptures tonight that are not in the introduction page, but they're two scriptures that we're going to stick some flags in because I want you to remember them. Number one is Proverbs 16:24. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. The other one's Romans 12:10. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. That is what we're going to do tonight. We are going to take delight in honoring each other. But before we do that, we're going to do something a little abnormal. So I told you when you came in, you're going to be talking good about each other. You're going to be talking nicely to each other. I'm going to give you a bunch of words, and if you've already flipped through because you're one of my honors kids and wants to know what's coming, We're going to use everything in this packet tonight. But before we do, let's talk about stress for just a second. Stress is inevitable in your life. Here's what I want to do. I want to talk for just a second about the role it may play in your marriage, and then I want to find out where you are. When we experience life stress, when we experience family stress, it impacts the way we communicate with each other. It impacts the way we talk to each other. So what I want to do tonight, I want to start by taking your measurable stress level, and I want to quantify it. I want to actually put a number. I want to assign a number to your stress level. To do that, I want you to flip to page 2 of that little packet I gave you. Here is what you are going to do with that packet. You are going to, with your spouse, you are going to circle everything that applies to your family within the last 12 months. I want to say that again in case you missed me. In the last 12 months. So if you have experienced any of the things on that list in the last 12 months, you're going to circle it. One point I want to be clear on. April and I did this activity a couple of nights ago, and we found something interesting. We didn't always agree whether or not we should circle one. That's okay. That's normal, I hope, because it happened to us. Here's what I want. If one of you believes that it's a life stressor, probably safe to circle it, and here's why I say that. If it's a stress for your husband, it's probably a stress for you too. If it's a stress for your wife, it's probably a stress for you too. So if one of you believes that you should circle it, then go ahead and circle it. And as you can see down at the bottom, there's room for you to put your total score. So I want you to circle your life stressors. I want you to total it up. I am going to give you, because there's conversation involved in this, I'm going to give you a full 5 minutes to work through this activity. At the end of those 5 minutes, come back to me and I'm going to tell you where you stand in relation to the norm. All right, so let's do the thing you're most interested in. So I know that talking about your life stresses is great and it's interesting, but let's do the thing that I know you're really most interested in, which is, how do I compare to everybody else? How do I know? Am I crazy? Am I not crazy? Because I know that's what you're thinking. I'm going to give you some hard numbers in just a second. Before I do, there's a couple little disclaimers I need to make sure that I've said. Number one, this is not ironclad. Meaning, if you don't feel that you are stressed out and your number indicates otherwise, you do not have to look at your spouse and go, well, I guess we're super stressed now. This is not ironclad. The other thing I want to mention to you is that the initial test that you just took is a fairly common stress test. It is used primarily for individuals to determine their susceptibility to disease. Meaning, when your stress level goes up, your immune system goes down, and this test is often given to determine in patients their susceptibility to illness. This exact same test has been applied to marriages, and there is a correlation with scores. Now, what is the score that determines whether you're crazy or not? I'm going to give you that now. If you scored between a 0 and 150, you probably have a fairly low life stress level. Some of you just looked at your spouse and laughed. I don't know if that's good or if that's bad. But I'm going to tell you something about these 3 levels so you understand what it is we're talking about. Number one, with these 3 levels, if you experience in your marriage between a 0 and a 150, here's what that indicates. What that indicates is you can be stressed sometimes. I don't want you to walk out of here and if your wife gets stressed out about something tomorrow saying, hey, we're like a 97, chill. That's not how this works. I want you to understand that stress does still occur. Here's what this means. If you scored between a 0 and a 150, odds are stress is probably not playing a big role in how you communicate with your partner. So if you scored a 110, I don't want you to feel that life stress is the reason you're short with your partner. The reason you're short with your partner is probably something else. If you scored between 150 and 300, for the record, the average score is in the low 200s. If you scored between a 150 and 300, that is a moderate life stress level. What that means is you've got some stuff going on. And from time to time, you are susceptible to speaking to your spouse in a way that you don't intend. Your tone, which we talked about last week, which, by the way, I have had a lot of people say, yeah, tone, that's totally me. So apparently we hit on something there. We may have to circle back around to that. If you are in the moderate level, that indicates to me that from time to time, you're going to have a moment where life gets in the way and you're short with your spouse, and the culprit to that is probably life. If you scored over a 300, here's my best advice. My best advice to you is to look at your partner, high five, and tell them, sorry for the things I've said. Because the reality is, if you scored over a 300, you have a lot going on. You have a lot going on. Now, for the record, I was shocked when April and I did this because we were right at that threshold, which I did not expect. Apparently she did. It was weird. I did not expect to be that high. And it doesn't mean that your marriage is in crisis, and it doesn't mean that you're going to hate each other by the end of the month. What it means is you have a lot going on in life. And I might encourage you from time to time to look at the other person and ask the question, is this about you, or is this about the fact that we just have an awful lot of stuff going on? I want to do something for you to give you a chance to unpack this, because I understand that I just gave you a lot of information and that you just did some exploration on your marriage. So what I want you to do is, I want you to look at your partner and for 60 seconds, have a conversation about what you just experienced. Were you surprised by the score that you got, and what does it mean for you and your marriage? I'm going to give you 60 seconds. All right. A few years ago, April and I bought a house in Rockwall, and about a year after we bought that house, there was a storm that came through, and it was the last one of the season. It was around Father's Day, and that we have some trees out front. We have these two big 40-foot giant trees in the front yard. Lightning hit one of those trees, and as lightning does, traveled through the house, just picking and choosing what it was going to fry. And a bunch of the stuff in our house fried. It's an old house, and so I don't know what that means. I'm not an electrician, but whatever. We had a bunch of stuff that broke. Here's what I figured out that summer. I figured out that stress really impacts the way you talk to each other, and for the first time in my life, it affected me as physically. I got sick because of it, and I will never forget, as long as I live, I was in Costco, and I was walking through the aisle, and my phone rang, and I answered it, and it was April, I think. It sounded like a mess of a human being, and she was sobbing uncontrollably. And the reason she was sobbing uncontrollably was because she had kept it together. She had done so well. Our water heater went out and caught fire because I tried to fix it. That's a true story, by the way. Our TV, our electronics, our refrigerator was okay, wasn't it? It was the microwave that fried. Every electronic we had on one side of the house fried. She did great with all of it. She kept it together. But while I was at Costco, she had taken all the kids' dirty laundry and she had put it in the washing machine, poured the detergent in, and pulled the button, and that's when she realized the washing machine was fried too. And that was the thing that pushed her over the edge. I tell you that story because I want you to know stress is inevitable. It's going to happen. What matters in your marriage is not the guarantee that you're not going to experience stress. What matters in your marriage is the guarantee that when it does, you're going to be okay. When you experience hard times, that you're going to be okay. So how do we build that kind of confidence in your marriage? The first thing you do is we do a lot of what we did last week. You continue to talk. If you can have the conversations that we introduced last week on a regular basis, you're going to be able to withstand those moments, those lightning strike moments. You're going to be able to withstand those a lot easier. The second thing you do is you do what we're going to do tonight. Last week we explored the idea that while we spend a lot of time talking to our spouse, we don't spend as much time talking about the meaningful stuff, digging into who our spouse is and understanding what makes them tick, what makes them excited, what they're passionate about, what their memories are. We don't do enough of that. I think the same thing is true of our observations. Every day, you see things in your spouse that you love, and you see things in your spouse that annoy you. Every day, you see things in their behavior that you appreciate and things that kind of drive you nuts. Which one of those two things are you more likely to express to your partner? Probably the stuff that drives you nuts, right? Okay, not today. Today, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do the opposite of that. Before we get into the actual nice talk, I want you to do something for me. I want you to answer a question. You're going to look at your partner. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. You each have 30 seconds to answer this question. I'm not going to give you any more prompting other than the question itself. Here is the question. What feelings and memories do you have about your partner early in your relationship? Now, this could be an extended conversation. Please be respectful of each other and the fact that you each have 30 seconds. I don't care who starts, but you have 30 seconds to do this activity. So my question for you is, how did that conversation go? Now, I'm going to tell you what I mean by how did that conversation go. I'm curious as to what the tone of the conversation you just had with your partner was. And the reason I'm anxious is because what I just put you through was something I've done on a lot of unsuspecting couples over the years. That was not a casual conversation. That was actually a pretty detailed marriage test. Here's why I gave you the question I just gave you. In a marriage counseling session, when I ask you to talk about your past, I'm listening for one thing. Which direction does the conversation slant? If you tend to talk about good moments and happy moments, if you're laughing, that tells me there's a pretty strong fondness system between the two of you. And it tells me that things are headed in a good direction, and whatever the problem is, we need to probably work on some communication stuff, but we're okay. If the conversation slants negative, if you remember the bad moments about the wedding, all the stuff that went wrong, if you remember the ways you didn't get along when you were dating, the ways your parents didn't like him and you didn't like them, if that's where your brain goes, that's worrisome to me. Now, I'm not saying that means your marriage is in trouble, don't misunderstand me, but it means to me that the fondness system that you have for your partner may need a tweaking. And tonight is a great opportunity for you to begin doing that. Now, again, I can't stress this enough. If your conversation slanted negative, it is not an indictment on your marriage. I am not telling you that you're broken. What I'm telling you is tonight is really important for you, because what we're going to do is hopefully going to spin that conversation in a different direction. As I mentioned, fondness is really important. Fondness prevents contempt. Liking the other person prevents contempt. It also prevents defensiveness. In the marriage and family world, those are two of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And what I mean by that is those are two of the four things that you observe in a marriage. And if you see these two in combination, it's really, really bad. It's really worrisome. And contempt and defensiveness can be treated by fondness exercises. And the fondness exercises we're going to do tonight are going to do that. Now, this may seem like a no-brainer. Telling your partner that you like your partner, telling your partner what you like about your partner, you may think that that's a no-brainer. It's not. If you are not active, if you are not deliberate in engaging in conversation that lets the person sitting next to you know not just that you love them or that you appreciate them, but know why. If they don't know why, then you're probably not connecting the way you could. I want you to be passionately in like with your spouse tonight. I want you to walk out of here passionately in like with your spouse. I want you to sound like a middle school kid writing a note. I want you to get in the truck and say, I like you. That's what I want to hear. Because that, to me, is more indicative of a happy, healthy marriage than just about anything else I can hear. I want to hear that you like each other. Now, I'm going to give you some activities that are going to do that. The first one is going to take place on page 3. On page 3 of your little workbook, you have a list of appreciations. This is going to be a very simple activity. Your job is to look at this list and do a few things. One, I want you to choose 3 that apply to your partner. Now, they are pretty specific, but choose 3 that you can express to your partner. I want you to circle those, and then I want you to express them to your partner. Now, before you do that, I want to make a quick note. It is not uncommon for me to do this activity with couples, and especially men push back on it a little bit because they feel like it feels fake, feels phony. You're giving me words. I'm just complimenting her based on what's on this piece of paper. Let me assure you of something. No spouse has ever not liked to hear the things on this piece of paper. And let me assure you of something else. If you are uncomfortable with this because this is not the way you normally communicate, and so you're afraid it's going to feel phony, the more uncomfortable you are, the more meaningful it's going to be to your partner because they already know that about you. They know that you don't express these things freely. So if it feels a little weird to read off of a list something that you appreciate about the other person, push through it. I promise you I've never met a spouse who didn't appreciate hearing these things. I'm going to give you 2 minutes total for this activity. So you each have 60 seconds. If you would like to expound on anything you say, if you want to offer an appreciation and then buffer it with a couple more sentences, go right ahead. As long as you stay within 2 minutes, we're good, because what we're going to do next is going to be the thing that's going to determine how tonight goes for you. All right. I've got the last activity we're going to get to tonight is the one that I'm most interested to get to. So I want to break down what we just did. What you just did was great, but it was really just a warm-up. That was Fondness 101. I was going to say Fondness for Dummies, but that felt insulting. What you just did was really basic. It was thank you for, and then you listed something that you appreciate. The problem with that is we're talking about fondness. We're talking about how much you really genuinely appreciate your partner, and the list I just gave you is really more like gratitude. You're thankful that they do something for you. Now, I'm not undercutting it. It's great. It's important to express those things to your partner. But what we're about to get into is going to be much, much deeper and much more meaningful. And it's going to require you to dig deep into some stuff in your life. I want to assure you of something before we get into this final activity. One, what you're about to do is what really matters to your spouse. Telling them that you appreciate that he takes the trash out most nights, or that she does the dishes, or that you take care of the kids. Those are great. Those are wonderful, and we absolutely need to affirm our spouses in that way. Please do not misunderstand me. That is vital to a happy marriage. But what we're about to do is the kind of stuff that's going to save your marriage. The stuff that we're about to do is going to be the kind of thing that when things get really hard, they're going to cause your spouse to look at you with trust and with confidence, and look at you knowing that no matter how bad things get, we're going to be okay. And the reason we're going to be okay is because you feel all the things that we're about to talk about. When life gets really hard, I want you to refer back to the list that we're about to look at. This is not just the what. We just talked about the what. What do you appreciate? What we're about to talk about is the why and the when. When we talk about parenting, which at some point we'll do something similar to this for parents of school-age kids, we're going to talk a lot about self-esteem and how to build it and how not to build it. You don't build self-esteem in a kid by telling them they're great. Tell them they're great, don't get me wrong, but that's not how you build self-esteem. That's how you build a relationship with them. The way you build self-esteem in somebody is by acknowledging the things they accomplish, by acknowledging the things that they do. So they have evidence. When you tell them I'm smart, they have evidence to back that up. When you tell them they're fun, they have evidence to back that up. That you need to point to the things they actually do. Tonight you're going to do this with your partner. There are a lot of vague words on this piece of paper that you're about to look at. These words are things like funny. It's great to say to your spouse, you're funny. It's something else to say, you're funny. I appreciate that you're funny because it lightens the mood when we argue. It lightens the mood when we're all hanging out together as a family. And here's a time that you were funny. Yesterday, when you said that thing about my mom, it was funny. It was funny. I admit it. It was funny. I want you to give your spouse not just the idea that you like them, but I want you to give them, really and truly, I want you to give them an understanding of why you appreciate the things that you appreciate. Take a look at page 4. On page 4, I want you to find 4 things that apply to your spouse. 4 words that apply to your spouse. So you can go ahead and start looking at that list. 4 things that apply to your spouse. What you're going to do is you're going to explain to your spouse why you cherish this thing about them. This is not just something you appreciate. This is something that genuinely and sincerely is one of the reasons you love the person sitting next to you. It's one of the reasons that you like the person sitting next to you. I want you to find 4 things that you can express. Tell them why you cherish it, and then I want you to give them concrete, hard evidence of when you saw it in them. And then I want you to talk about what it says about your partner. And I'm going to leave these instructions up for you as we do this activity. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do this, but we're about a minute or so ahead, so I'm not going to start the timer just yet. I am, however, going to tell you, go ahead and get into this activity, and I will let you know when our time is up. I want to make sure you understand something. The words that you're expressing to your partner, the sentiment that you're expressing to your partner right now, I didn't overstate it a few minutes ago when I talked about how this is the stuff that can get your marriage through those really hard times. I'm going to guess that somewhere in the conversation you heard something you either haven't heard in a really long time or something that you didn't know. Can I see with a nod of the head if that's pretty accurate? Okay. To me, it's unfortunate, but it's true. This is the stuff that we miss. We see it every day and we observe it, and if you ask on a test or in a marriage workshop, if you ask if these things are true, we'll say that they are, but the reality is we don't express them to the degree that we should. I want to encourage you tonight to commit to doing this more often. Now, I don't necessarily mean you have to, like last week, I want you to keep those questions from last week. This week, I don't necessarily need you to get out a piece of paper that has a bunch of words on it. But I do want you to remember that the person sitting next to you wants to feel valuable. They want to feel like they matter. And I want to say this as clearly as I can say it. When I work with extramarital affairs, and when I work with couples where somebody has strayed and somebody has, even if it's an emotional affair, 95% of the time, do you know why that happens? It's not because of the physical connection. It's because someone else told them these things. Somebody else told them something deep and personal and made them feel special and made them feel desired and made them feel wanted. If you want to create a marriage that is impervious to that kind of intrusion, this is how you get there. Your homework tonight is to find as many of those words as you can and use them. Now, I'm not necessarily going to prescribe that you take this home and that you go through it point by point. Some of these words are similar. Funny is on there, and so is humorous. Whatever word you connect with, use that one. And if you want to use both of them, use both of them. But what I'm going to encourage you to do tonight is to commit to having conversation with your spouse about more than just the critical moments. Talk to them about why you appreciate who they are, why you value them as a human being. Paul gave us a really good example. Philippians was just an easy place to start, but you could find examples of that all through his writings. He tells people what they mean to him, and he tells them why. Be sure you're doing that with your spouse. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that final activity. That final activity is about continuing the enhancement, and it's a much deeper activity. And it's going to take you back into your relationship, much like these pictures will take the Johnsons back into their relationship. I'm so proud of this slide. Quinn, did she tell you that was coming?
She didn't say what it was.
Ah! I lost my place. I just for the record, I want the one on the left to be my phone screensaver. And the shirt, like unbuttoned to here with the gold chain? You, my friend, you are full of surprises. We're continuing the theme of communication and intimate knowledge of each other. Here's your long-term assignment. The long-term assignment, and I probably shouldn't have left this up here because you're just unpacking it, aren't you? Here's the long-term assignment. By the way, the Johnsons are some of my favorite people on the planet, and I asked her ahead of time whether you would be okay with that. And she said no, and that's why I did it. Got it. Again, I don't know where to go with this. One of the ways that fondness can be reestablished, and I want to talk for just a second to those of you who may have struggled with this. Those of you who maybe don't feel great about the person sitting next to you, you feel like you've drifted apart. There's been a lot of trouble between the two of you. Kids have gotten in the way, jobs have gotten in the way, and you may have gone a month or two without really having fun with the person sitting next to you. One of the best ways to increase your fondness and increase the love and the enjoyment that you have with the other person is to go back through your relationship history, to talk about the answers to the questions that you see on page 5. It's going to take you through your feelings about the other person, your memories, your happy, your fond memories. We're going to try and rekindle something that once brought you together. At some point in your relationship, you looked at the other person and you decided that you were ready to spend the rest of your life with this other person. If you struggled with anything we did tonight, page 5 is going to be really important to you. If you didn't struggle with anything we did tonight, page 5 is still going to be important to you because it's going to prevent you from ever getting to a place where you do struggle. Next week, I want to tell you what we're going to talk about. I prep you for this one because I want you to know what's happening coming in. Next week, we're going to talk about all the things that prevent you from being the kind of couple that you want to be. Next week, we're going to talk to a degree about your phones. If you have ever looked at your partner and thought, whoever invented the cell phone, I'm going to hunt him down and I'm going to strangle him. If you've ever had that thought about your partner, next week is going to be good for you. If you would put Mark Zuckerberg on the list of people who should be sent to another country and never allowed back in the country, next week is going to be for you. But I want you to know ahead of time, my approach to this is not to demonize the behavior. I'm going to make a lot of jokes about it, but I'm not going to demonize the behavior. I'm going to do two things next week. Number one, I'm going to give you practical approaches for managing it that don't involve yelling and screaming. Number two, I am going to give you a guide to having conversations about these things that I promise you will be as painless as this conversation can be. We're not just going to talk about phones, by the way. We're going to talk about kids. We're going to talk about jobs. We're going to talk about schedules. We're going to talk about how we have a tendency in this culture to so overload our schedules that it prevents us from connecting to each other. I would hope that is appealing to you. If it's not, I hope you'll be here anyway because I think you'll find something valuable. I want to leave you with this. I gave you a lot of words tonight. I want to encourage you to go home and like your partner. And if you've struggled with this, that's okay. I asked you a bunch of weird stuff. The stuff that's on this list are not words that you would normally use in appreciation of your spouse. Here's what I hope. I hope that over the course of the next couple of days, you will go out of your way to express these things to your partner for the sole purpose of ensuring that your relationship is solid, and that you like the person sitting next to you. Let me finish with a prayer, and then we will dismiss. Father, we come to you now to thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to reconnect with each other. God, I pray that as these people leave here tonight, I pray that you'll leave with them, and I pray that your thoughts for them and your desires for them and your plans for them will go as well. God, I pray that they'll be open to hearing you in these words, and I pray that you'll guide them as they go through these activities. God, I pray that it will be beneficial, and for whoever it is in this room who really needs what we did tonight, God, I pray that they'll be open to that and that they'll use it. Father, I thank you for every person in this room, and I thank you for bringing them into my life. I ask these things through your Son. Amen. I will see you next week.